implements the CI/CD using Git integration and using the deployment pipelines. So in both the ways, it is implemented in the Microsoft Fabric, we can say. These tools will help us to collaborate with our development team, and also you can provide, it will provide you with an effective, efficient process, we can say, where you can deliver and update the content. So this is basically what the tools are going to help us with. These tools, which is there within the Fabric environment for continuous integration and continuous delivery, these tools will help us with all these things. Now let's imagine a situation. I'm giving you an overview and then I will be starting with the content. So if we talk about a Fabric engineer or a developer, they are the ones who are responsible for designing, building, and also for maintaining the Fabric items, which can store, process, and analyze the data, we can say. We have to collaborate with other teams so that they could release the changes from development through the production in different Fabric workspaces. So this is how we collaborate with different teams to release all these changes, we can say. And with multiple engineers who are working on the same project, there is also a need to incrementally release the integrated Fabric item changes. And also there is a, we can say, requirement. There is some in release which is there. Like you have to move those changes from a development process where they can be tested through the development. You have to move it to a test environment, and from there you can quickly release it. So lifecycle management in Fabric will let us to do all these things. So if I talk about this lifecycle management in Fabric, it is going to use the deployment pipelines. It will use the source control integration to help us achieve this continuous integration and continuous delivery, we can say, which is basically the CI/CD. We can integrate Fabric with version control systems like GitHub. We can integrate it with Azure DevOps, and this way we can improve our delivery process and we can integrate the automated testing as well. So we are going to discuss in this particular lesson about how to work with the source control in Fabric, how to use the Fabric deployment pipelines, and also we will talk about the Fabric REST APIs, which we can use for the CI/CD's automation. So let's get started and let's understand first of all the CI/CD's concept. What is the CI/CD's concept? Think of the CI/CD as a software delivery pipeline. It's a streamlined approach to building, testing, and also releasing the software faster and more reliably, we can say. This is basically what CI/CD does. If we have a look at this particular diagram, we can see there are three different stages which is there. These are the three key stages we can say. The very first stage is about continuous integration, which we call it as CI, continuous integration. What does it mean is, developers, they frequently push the code changes to a shared repository. Developers frequently, in the sense they can do it several daily or they can do it several times a day also. What they might be doing is they might be making some changes. They push those code changes to a shared repository. Why does it matter? What is the use of the CI? Why it matters at all? So every change will trigger automated builds and tests. So issues are detected early. That is what happens. Just imagine, suppose we have 5 developers who are working on the same app. With CI, their work integrates smoothly without breaking each other's code, because every push is verified automatically. So we are not disturbing the work of each other, but 5 of those developers, they are working on the same app. And with the help of this continuous integration, their work is integrated smoothly without breaking each other's code, we can say. And how it is not breaking? Because every push is verified automatically. That is the reason. So this is basically what we can say CI is all about. This is what CI is all about, which is the continuous integration part. Same way, when you might have seen that when you and members of your team, they are each responsible for developing, they are each responsible for maintaining different parts of the Fabric environment. It's a common scenario which we have within the organizations. So best practice is to work in isolated development environments until you are ready to combine your development efforts and you are ready to publish your changes to a particular pre-production environment. So once when you are ready to publish your changes, You just have to make sure that your changes don't break the existing code or it doesn't interfere with the changes made by other developers. This is something which you have to just make sure about. There is also a need to ensure that code changes are saved and it can be reverted if there are any issues. So whatever changes you're making, whatever code changes you are doing, it should be saved also, and it should be we should be able to revert it back if there is any issue in those cases. So the built-in continuous integration and continuous delivery capabilities in Fabric can help us to facilitate this. And this is what, as I said, the continuous integration is going to do. So continuous integration will help us to avoid any bugs and code failures, and it will also let us continuously develop and release the functionalities, we can say. In continuous integration, you will frequently commit the code to a shared code branch or trunk it in a version control system. And once all it is merged, changes are validated by the build process and an automated testing would be performed. This is basically how the continuous integration is going to work. Then we have continuous delivery. Continuous delivery means it happens after continuous integration. Once the CI is complete, once the continuous integration is completed, the code is deployed to a staging environment where more automated testing is performed before the code is released into production. That is basically what the continuous delivery is all about. So if I talk about continuous delivery, which means in simple words that once the code passes the CI, it will be automatically packed and prepared for release into the staging or into the pre-production environments. So the key point of continuous delivery is that release is ready at any time, but still it requires manual approval to go live. That is what continuous delivery is. There would be some kind of a manual approval which is required to go live. So in real world, if we consider a situation like your QA team, they can test a new feature as soon as it is ready. And once the business gives the green light, it can be deployed. That is what the continuous delivery does. Moving on to the next, which we have, that is the continuous deployment. Now, if I talk about continuous deployment, this is basically the next level, we can say, where every successful build is automatically pushed to the production without manual intervention. That is kind of a continuous deployment. It's a process where it will automatically release the updates into the production environment through a structured deployment stages once they pass all the automated tests after that. This is basically what happens in the continuous deployment. Now, why does this continuous deployment matter? CD matters. So it will enable rapid feedbacks also and a constant innovation also it will enable. Think of some apps like basically we have Amazons, we have Netflix. Think of any of such apps which is there. They deploy hundreds of updates per day seamlessly. This is basically what a continuous deployment is going to do. So this is what we mean by the CI/CD. The CI/CD pipeline ensures agility, quality, and speed. And these are the critical factors for the modern DevOps and the cloud native application life cycles, we can say. So this is basically what an overview about the CI/CD is all about. This is what CI/CD is going to do. Now let's talk about the implementation of these deployment pipelines. How we can implement these deployment pipelines is what we need to understand. So over here, we can see these are the different workspaces. These are the different stages which we have within the pipelines. So let me talk a bit about this deployment pipeline. What are these deployment pipelines and how we can work with it? So over here, we are using the CI/CD within the Fabric environment, we can say. In this particular diagram also, what we are doing is we are using the CI/CD within the Fabric environment. So we have some deployments which is there. We are customizing the stages. We are comparing the stages. All these things is what basically we are doing over here. So let me guide you one by one about what all things we have over here in this particular diagram which is there. So the very first thing which we can see The very first thing is all about customizing the stages. What do we mean by customizing the stages, or what it means actually when we say that we have to customize the stages? So in this case, if we talk about the pipelines which we have, so basically, pipelines will enable a continuous deployment and continuous integration and continuous deployment approach, which will ensure that the content is updated, it is tested, and also it is regularly refreshed as well. Pipelines are basically a way in which we can automate the movement of the content through the development. Whatever the movement of the content is there, that we can do through the development to testing to production stages of the content development lifecycle. This is how we actually deploy we have these pipelines within the CI/CD environment, continuous integration and continuous deployment. This approach has a pipelines which enable us with these facilities or these concepts, we can say. Now, other than that, what we need to understand is basically about what are these pipelines used for, or what are the use cases of these pipelines which we have over here. What are these deployment pipelines? So within the Fabric's environment, deployment pipelines will help us to deploy our Fabric items across different environments. What you can do, you can use a deployment pipeline to basically deploy your Fabric items across different environments, like it can be from development, test, and production. You can deploy it like this. This will let you develop and test the content in Fabric before it reaches the end users, we can say. So this is basically what the deployment pipelines are going to do. The diagram which is represented over here, this is actually showing us about how we can create a deployment pipeline. There are two different methods in which we can create the deployment pipeline. We can use the workspaces icon on the navigation pane, and from there also we can create it, or we can use the create deployment pipeline icon at the top of a workspace. Both the options I will be showing you in few seconds about in the demo how we can do it. So we have to basically select the workspaces and we can click on deployment pipelines. We will select new pipeline over there. We have to give the pipeline a name. We have to define and name the stages in our pipeline. Then we will select create and continue. So once we click on this create and continue, we will come over here in this particular page. This is where we assign a workspace to a stage. Like for development, basically for development stage, we will be having a workspace which we need to assign. For test stage, we should be having a workspace which we will assign. And for the production, same way, we will assign a workspace to it. And basically, we will be seeing some green tick marks or check marks next to the stages, which means that we are ready to deploy the content to the pipeline. This is basically how we do it. So first we customize the changes, then we assign the workspaces, then we compare the changes. Whatever changes are there, we can compare it. And at the end, we are going to deploy the changes across the stages, which means we will deploy the content to a pipeline stage. The deployment process will let you clone content from one stage in the pipeline to another, typically from the development to test and from test to the production. So if you want to deploy the content between the stages, we have to select the stage, like we have to select the stage which we have to deploy to, and then we will select the stage in the deploy from drop down. So this is basically we have to configure its settings and then only we can do the changes. And after doing all these things, we have to select the deploy button. And then we do it this way for implementing the pipelines, we can say. This is how these are the steps which we actually follow to do the same things. So this is how it is actually achieved from development to test to the production environments, we can say. This is how we achieve it. And this is actually displayed, or it is what is described in this particular slide also. We have these three different stage deployment pipelines. We have development, we have test, we have production. And each stage is associated with a workspace. You can see every stage is associated with different workspaces. Like we may be having ORG apps, we have ORG, we have data pipelines, then we have basically notebooks. So all these are the different assets which we have within the workspace. Every workspace has got different assets within it. This is basically how we can work with it. Now, how we can use the deployment pipelines with the Git? We need to understand about the concept where we have to use these deployment pipelines with the Git, we can say. So changes aren't visible in the pipeline until committed in the source control. So whatever changes you make, those changes are not going to be visible in the pipeline until we go and commit it in the source control. This is something which is there. So let's talk about how we can use these deployment pipelines with the Git. Deployment pipelines can be used with the Git branches. It would be used to promote the content between the development, the test, and the production environments when the content for each environment resides in different Git repositories or in the branches. So if you want to use the deployment pipelines with Git branches, you will be doing some changes over here. You have to assign each workspace in the deployment pipeline to the Git repository, and you have to branch it in the Git integration with workspace settings. So this is basically how we do it. Then you will be basically promoting the content between staging environments using the deploy button. Then in the pipeline, you will use the deploy content to a pipeline stage button. Like this, you have to deploy it. This is basically how we do it. And this moves the content between the environments in the fabric, but the Git repository won't be updated until you manually update it from the workspace. So Git repo will not get updated until you don't go and manually update it from the workspace. So over here, we can see all these green tick marks or check marks. So these indicates that a data pipeline item exists in all three staging environments of the deployment pipeline in Fabric, and that the Fabric stages are synchronized as well. This is basically what these green tick marks indicate. So changes synchronized in the pipeline, they are visible, but they are not made in Git until synchronized from the workspaces. This is basically what it means. So we have to commit the requirement. Even if you have created or even if you have updated a pipeline in the development workspace, it won't reflect in the development pipeline unless the changes are committed to the connected Git repository, we can say. So this is basically how we use these deployment pipelines with Git. So this is basically how the changes which we were talking about, the source control and all, this is basically how it is going to work. Whatever changes when we select the source control over here from either the test or from the production workspaces that are part of the deployment pipeline, we will be able to see that the pipeline hasn't been synchronized. We will see this option where the pipeline, whatever the pipeline is there, it has not been synchronized with the Git repository. So if you want to synchronize the repository with the test workspace, then you have to basically commit the changes. You have to use this commit button in the source control window, which basically using this commit button only you will be able to sync it. This is how we do it actually. This is how we can work with it. This is a commit requirement. So even if we have created or even if you have just updated a pipeline in the development workspaces, it won't reflect in the deployment pipeline unless the changes are committed to the connected Git repository. So this is how we can commit the changes, we can say. Now moving on to the next we have, so here we are going to talk about using the Fabric REST APIs. So we need to understand what is the concept of this Fabric REST APIs. We can actually automate the CI/CD using the Fabric APIs, we can say. So Fabric REST APIs will allow us to automate the Fabric procedures and processes. It also improves the efficiency and the productivity. So REST API stands for Representational State Transfer Programming Application Interface. REST API means Representational State Transfer Programming Application Interface. So Azure REST APIs are used to manage and interact with various Azure services which is there. We have got some advantages also of using these Fabric REST APIs. Like what are the advantages which we get? It automates the repeating process with consistency. It makes it easier to perform the data processing on an ongoing basis. This is one of the advantages. Second advantage is the seamless integration with other systems and applications. It also provides us with a streamlined and efficient data pipeline, we can say. So these Fabric CI/CD REST APIs would be available for deployment pipelines and Git integration, both the things. Now, what are these Fabric REST APIs which is available to automate the process? Let's talk about it, how we can use these Fabric REST APIs for the CI/CD to automate the processes. This is basically what it talks about over here. So we have some API calls which we can make, like commit is one of a call. Commit, what is the functionality of the commit is like, we can commit the changes which is made in the workspace to the connected remote branch. That is what the commit is going to do. Then we have update with us. Update means we can update the workspace with the commits pushed to the connected branch. We can update the workspace, basically whatever commits we push to the branches, we can update it with that. So push the updates to or from the connected workspace. This is something which is very useful for the syncing environments, we can say. Then we have review. Review means it will let us preview the uncommitted or the pending changes, and it gives the team a chance to validate before committing. So we can review any pending or any uncommitted changes in it. We can see which items have incoming changes. We can see which items have changes that weren't committed to the Git with the Git status API. Those things we can review using this review API call. Then we have list with us. List deployment pipelines stage items basically, which means it returns the supported items from the workspaces, which is assigned to the specified stage of the specified deployment pipeline. That is what the list deployment pipeline stage items does. Then we have this deploy, where we can deploy the stage content. Deploy items from the specified stage of the specified deployment pipeline. That is what the deploy does. It is just like triggering the actual promotion of the content, like the data sets or the pipelines, from one stage, for example, development, to another, like testing or the production. This is basically what the Fabric REST APIs is going to do. Now, why does these APIs matter? What does this API provides us with? So these APIs actually facilitate, first of all, the automation of our routine deployment steps. If you want to automate your routine deployment steps, for those purposes, it is useful. Secondly, if you need the granular control and traceability across environments, for that purpose also it is useful. Third is for the integration with the Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions, or any other CI/CD platforms, we can say. And fourthly, it is basically for governed and consistent deployment processes, the key which is regulated or the enterprise settings we can make. So this is basically how we can use the Fabric REST API. These are some of its use cases in very simple words, we can say. Now let's proceed